He was rich, powerful, still wounded by the woman who betrayed him. So when Ryan received the wedding invitation from his ex-fiancée, the one who left him for someone richer, he vowed to make an entrance no one would forget. But the homeless woman he invited wasn't just a random act of revenge. She had secrets. Fire. A past tied to everything he thought he knew. And what she did that night would leave everyone speechless. But what happened after that moment, no one in that room could have imagined. If this story moves you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. From where are you listening to this tale? Your presence here keeps this channel and these stories alive. The heavy envelope arrived wrapped in thick ivory cardstock, embossed with gold leaf and scented with something overly floral and expensive. Ryan Prescott had stared at it for a full minute before sliding his finger beneath the seal. As the paper cracked open, it was as though something inside him cracked with it. Vanessa Harrington was getting married, not just to anyone, but to Sebastian McAllister, heir to one of the largest oil conglomerates in Texas. She hadn't just moved on, she had upgraded. Ryan let out a humorless chuckle. He leaned back in his high-backed leather chair, one arm draped over the polished armrest, the other holding the invitation like it was an insult. Maybe it was. Maybe she had sent it to remind him of what he'd lost, or worse, to show him what he'd never meant in the first place. He stared out of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan office, the skyline burning orange with the late afternoon sun. For a man who could buy buildings with the tap of his thumb, that piece of paper held more power than he liked to admit. And yet, beneath the ache, a spark. Something colder, sharper. If Vanessa thought she could walk down the aisle while he watched like some discarded chapter in her story, she was wrong. He wouldn't show up alone. No, he'd arrive with someone unexpected, unforgettable, the kind of woman who would make Vanessa question every decision she had ever made. That night, Ryan walked the streets of Soho trying to clear his head. He didn't notice the woman at first. She wasn't begging, wasn't slumped over, or sleeping on a crate. She was standing, arms crossed, eyes locked on the glowing windows of a bistro, the scent of roasted garlic and baked bread floating out onto the street. Her dark hair was messy but thick, her coat torn but buttoned up tight, and when she turned her head, something in her gaze stopped him cold. It wasn't despair, it was defiance. Their eyes met, and instead of looking away, she raised an eyebrow. "Got something to say, Suit?" Her voice wasn't desperate. It was clear, crisp, the voice of someone who used to speak with authority but hadn't in a while. Ryan blinked, the tension in his jaw easing into a faint smirk. "Do you always start conversations like that?" She gave a half shrug. "Only when rich men stare at me like I'm some charity case they might feel noble rescuing." His grin widened. Fair enough. He didn't know why he said it. He didn't know what made him stop. But the next words were already forming in his mind. He stepped closer. "What if I told you I have an invitation to a very public wedding, and I need someone different to go with me?" She narrowed her eyes. Different like what? Shiny accessory? A walking scandal? More like unforgettable disruption. Her arms fell to her sides, and something flickered across her face. A challenge? A question? She studied him for a moment, then nodded toward the cafe window. "Buy me dinner, then ask again." They sat at a corner table in silence for a while, surrounded by the clatter of silverware and quiet jazz. She ate like someone who hadn't had a real meal in days, but with the elegance of someone who knew exactly which fork to use. "I'm Ryan," he said eventually. "I didn't ask." She wiped her mouth with the linen napkin and looked him dead in the eye. "But fine. Savannah. That name, it didn't match her coat or her boots. It sounded expensive." He leaned forward, intrigued. "So, Savannah, you ever worn a designer gown worth more than a car?" She smirked. "Once. Didn't like the heels." That spark again. He couldn't place it, but it was there. "You'll come?" he asked, voice low. She studied him for a long time, then leaned in. "I'll go, but I'm not your accessory. You want me there? I walk in on my terms. I'm not playing your pretty pawn." He chuckled. "You really think you're the one calling the shots?" Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, honey, I'm not thinking, I know." And for a moment, Ryan forgot all about Vanessa. 2 days later, she walked into his penthouse like she'd lived there before. Ryan had arranged for stylists, designers, and a full team from a high-end salon in Manhattan. He had expected protests, awkwardness, maybe even tears. What he didn't expect was how naturally she took the champagne from the assistant's hand. How she looked at the silk gowns not with awe but indifference. "How do you know your size?" one of the stylists asked, surprised as Savannah slipped into a fitted emerald dress like it was stitched onto her bones. "I remember things," she said quietly, her eyes meeting Ryan's in the reflection of the mirror. Something in him paused. As they prepped her hair, one of the stylists commented on her cheekbones. "You've got a face like someone who used to model." Savannah gave a faint smile but didn't answer. When she emerged 2 hours later, Ryan stared. Not just because she looked stunning, which she did, but because she looked familiar, as if she belonged in that world far more than most of the women he'd dated. He stood slowly. "You're not what I expected." She tilted her head. "And you are exactly what I expected." It wasn't an insult. It wasn't even cold. It was simply honest. Ryan cleared his throat. "The wedding's tomorrow. Black tie. Limousine picks us up at 4. Savannah walked past him, the scent of jasmine trailing behind her. "Then you better be ready, Mr. Prescott, because after tomorrow, your ex-fiancée won't remember her own name." Ryan watched her disappear down the hallway of his apartment and suddenly felt something he hadn't in years: uncertainty. Who was this woman? And why did it feel like she was the one pulling the strings? The morning of the wedding dawned gray and glassy, with Manhattan shrouded in a curtain of soft mist. Ryan stood by the penthouse window in a crisp robe, sipping his coffee, his thoughts unusually tangled. He heard her before he saw her, heels clicking on marble, steady and confident. Then Savannah stepped into view, still in a simple robe, hair pulled into a messy bun, no makeup, no drama. And yet, there was something composed about her. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked, not bothering to hide the skepticism in his voice. She took the coffee cup from his hand without asking and sipped it slowly. "You're the one who invited me." Ryan stared at her. She didn't blink. An hour later, the stylist team arrived, 4 women and 2 men, all impeccably dressed and buzzing with professional energy. Savannah barely flinched as they circled around her like bees to a queen. Her hair was first, loose curls cascading like waves of mahogany silk down her back. Then the skin, gently cleansed, prepped, brushed with foundation so light it let her freckles whisper through. The makeup artist stepped back with a breathless nod. "She has the kind of face you don't cover. You just illuminate." The gowns arrived next. Racks and racks of shimmering fabrics in muted golds, deep emeralds, sapphires, and blood reds. Designers cooed and fussed, but Savannah didn't flinch. Ryan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching, and with each layer she shed, of grime, of streetwear, of invisible armor, something new emerged. Or rather, something old returned. She chose a gown of midnight blue silk, clean lines, open back, a neckline that hinted at softness but commanded attention. The room fell still when she stepped out of the dressing suite. Even the assistant stopped scrolling her phone. Ryan straightened, his breath caught. Savannah's eyes found him immediately. Her posture was tall, her chin slightly lifted, her expression unreadable, but not unfamiliar. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. "You look like someone I should already know," he said. She tilted her head. "Maybe you did. In another lifetime." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You look like you belong at that wedding more than anyone." "Correction," she said calmly, stepping past him. "I used to belong. I'm here now, because I choose to be." The words hung in the air, heavier than expected. Ryan turned away, unsettled by the way she kept flipping his assumptions on their heads. Every minute with her was like chasing a ghost wrapped in velvet. In the limousine, she sat poised, legs crossed, one hand resting on the window. The city passed in streaks of rain and steel, her reflection dancing across the glass. "You've done this before," he murmured, unable to contain it anymore. Her lips curved. "Done what?" "Hair, makeup, gowns." This calm, "I'm not calm," she said. "I'm focused." He studied her. Focused on what? She turned to him then, eyes like embers in a storm. On making someone remember who they destroyed. Before he could ask more, the car slowed to a stop. The venue was a stone cathedral turned private estate, framed by a courtyard glowing with lanterns and camera flashes. Elite guests gathered under white awnings, sipping champagne and adjusting designer tuxedos. As they stepped out of the car, Ryan offered her his arm. She accepted, but it was clear she didn't need it. Heads turned instantly. Conversations stuttered. Glasses paused mid-air. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. But her presence was loud. Vanessa hadn't noticed them yet. Not until Ryan and Savannah crossed the marble entry hall and the bride-to-be turned. Vanessa's smile froze. The moment stretched like elastic between them. Savannah didn't flinch. Her eyes lingered on the white lace, the glimmering tiara, the perfectly staged happiness. Then she leaned closer to Ryan and whispered loud enough for Vanessa to hear. "She looks fragile." Ryan choked on a laugh. Vanessa's lips thinned, but she didn't speak. She turned away, but not before casting a lingering glance at Savannah's gown. The ceremony began shortly after. Ryan and Savannah were seated close to the altar, too close to be random. Whispers followed them like perfume. The officiant began the speech, but Savannah didn't listen. Her gaze wandered. Her fingers traced the edge of the seat. When Vanessa walked down the aisle, Savannah didn't clap, didn't smile. She just watched, unblinking. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, Savannah made her move. A soft piano played as guests mingled in the garden under fairy lights. Savannah floated between groups with ease. A compliment here, a question there. She was magnetic, elegant yet untouchable. Her laughter was soft, her eye contact direct. She wasn't just blending in, she was stealing the spotlight. At one point, Vanessa approached them, holding a glass of white wine. "I don't believe we've met," she said, gaze fixed on Savannah's necklace. Savannah smiled. "Oh, but I've heard so much about you." Vanessa blinked. "Really?" "Yes," Savannah said smoothly. "It's always fascinating to meet someone so consistent." Ryan nearly choked on his drink. Vanessa's smile cracked. "And you are?" Savannah reached for Ryan's hand, not sweetly, not performative, intentionally. "Let's just say, someone who knows how to recognize recycled fairy tales." Vanessa stepped back, thrown off balance. Ryan couldn't look away. Something was happening, and he wasn't sure if he was leading it anymore. Later, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the garden, Ryan finally said it. "You don't just know this world. You were this world." She didn't deny it, just turned toward the horizon. And then, calmly, "You're not the only one who lost something." Before he could ask what that meant, someone called his name from inside. The first dance was about to begin. He turned to Savannah, his voice uncertain for the first time. "Do you want to dance?" She met his eyes, and something passed between them. Not flirtation, not seduction, recognition. She extended her hand. "Lead the way, Mr. Prescott. Let's give them something to talk about." And as they walked back into the crowd, the music swelling, Ryan realized this wasn't just about his revenge anymore. This woman had come for her own reckoning, and he might not be ready for what came next. The ballroom shimmered with golden light, as if the chandeliers above had bottled fragments of the sun. Crystal glasses clinked, heels tapped softly on marble, and murmurs rippled like wind across velvet drapes. The elite of New York had gathered not merely to witness a wedding, but to reaffirm their place in a world where image ruled above all. And then, the doors opened. There was no music announcing their arrival, no fanfare, no spotlight, just the undeniable sound of heels, measured, controlled, deliberate. Savannah walked in beside Ryan with the quiet majesty of someone who didn't need permission to own the space she entered. Her posture was tall, her eyes calm, her steps in perfect sync with his. She didn't cling to his arm like a trophy. She glided beside him like an equal, like a woman who had once walked into rooms just like this and had everyone wondering who she was, long before the streets knew her name. Conversations stopped. Forks hovered mid-air. Heads turned, some slowly, others snapping around as if on instinct. One man whispered, "Who is that?" Another replied, "No idea, but she's not from here. Or maybe she's exactly from here." The bride noticed them before the groom. Vanessa's hand stiffened on Sebastian's arm, her lips twitching into a brittle smile. She tried to carry on speaking with the couple beside her, but her voice faltered. Her laugh turned sharp. Savannah didn't even glance at her. Not yet. She was too busy surveying the room, taking in the chandeliers, the floral arrangements, the guests carefully curated like pieces on a chessboard, and then her eyes locked with the string quartet in the corner. One of the violinists, a young woman with kind eyes, nodded subtly. It was enough. Ryan leaned toward Savannah. "They're staring like we just stole the bride's thunder," she replied without looking at him. "Good. Let them wonder which of us is the scandal." He smiled, but there was tension beneath it. She was calm, too calm, like she'd stepped into this moment with a script already written in her head. A waiter passed, offering champagne. Savannah took a glass with practiced ease, sipping it slowly. Not because she needed courage, but because she wanted to taste what luxury had once tasted like. The burn of effervescence, the cold bite of crystal. A group of socialites approached them. Women in backless dresses, men in sharply tailored suits. One of them, a hedge fund manager named Charles Everett, extended a hand toward Ryan, but kept his eyes on Savannah. "Prescott, I'd say you've outdone yourself." Ryan shook his hand, but Savannah intercepted the attention. "Charles Everett," she said, tilting her head slightly, "owner of the failed Latin American tech merger last spring." Charles blinked. "Excuse me?" Savannah smiled sweetly. It was bold, trying to mix crypto and sustainable agri-tech, but the pivot came too late, didn't it? There was a beat of stunned silence. Ryan turned slowly to look at her, blinking once. Charles laughed awkwardly. "You've done your research." "I lived through it," she replied, and walked past him. Ryan followed her with a mixture of confusion and awe. "You lived through a merger collapse?" She didn't answer, not directly. Instead, she scanned the room again. Then finally, her gaze settled on Vanessa. The bride stood near the dessert table, holding a flute of sparkling wine like it was the last barrier between her and composure. When Savannah began walking toward her, time seemed to compress. The air thickened. Vanessa straightened. Her smile snapped into place, camera ready. "Ryan," she said, her voice light but strained, "I didn't expect you to bring a guest." Savannah smiled, slowly, like moonlight inching over a still lake. "Oh, I'm not just a guest." Vanessa's jaw clenched. "No, I'm an echo," Savannah said, tone silky, "of the kind of woman you once pretended to be." The words landed like velvet-wrapped blades. Vanessa blinked. "Excuse me?" Savannah leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "You always knew how to wear elegance like armor, but you forgot. Real class doesn't need defense." Vanessa's breath hitched. Her hand shook slightly, spilling a few drops of champagne on her sleeve. Ryan stepped in, placing a hand lightly on Savannah's lower back, not as a claim but as a grounding point. He could feel her trembling, not out of fear, out of contained fire. Vanessa recovered quickly. "Well, I'm sure you'll enjoy the evening. Just don't get too comfortable." Savannah stepped closer. "Don't worry, I'm not here to take your place." She paused. Then, with a soft smile, "I'm here to make sure no one forgets who you stepped on to get yours." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving the bride frozen in place. Back at their table, Ryan finally broke the silence. "You know her." Savannah took a sip of her drink. "I knew what she was before you did. You've done more than just survive the streets, haven't you?" Her hand hovered above the glass, now motionless. Her eyes softened, but didn't lower. "I used to be someone, then I became no one, and now—" She turned to him, her voice quieter. "Now I'm something else entirely." Ryan leaned in. "Tell me who you really are." She stared at him for a long time, then gave the faintest smile. "Not yet." The music shifted. A dance was announced. Couples rose, drifting toward the marble floor as soft piano chords filled the space. Savannah stood, holding out her hand. "Let's give them something to whisper about." And Ryan followed, still unsure whether he was leading her or being led. The ballroom had dimmed just enough to let the chandeliers burn golden over the polished floor. A hush of anticipation spread as the first notes of a slow, orchestral waltz rippled through the air. The kind of music made for gliding, for gazes that linger, for confessions too dangerous to speak aloud. Savannah stepped onto the dance floor with the poise of someone born for that stage, but who hadn't stood on it in years. Her fingers slid naturally into Ryan's hand. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask. She simply moved. The crowd around them blurred as the two began to sway, their bodies aligning in that perfect tension between distance and desire. Every pivot, every shift of weight was a silent question, every brush of her fingers against his sleeve a whisper with no words. "You dance like you've done this before," Ryan murmured. She looked up at him, her lips barely parted. "That's because I have." There was no bravado in her tone, just truth, gliding out as effortlessly as the silk brushing against his legs. He pulled her just slightly closer, not enough to make a scene, but enough to feel the heat of her breath. "And yet, every time I think I know who you are," he whispered, "you hand me another puzzle piece that doesn't fit." Savannah's expression didn't falter, but a flash passed through her eyes, something like pain or memory. "Maybe I'm not the puzzle, Ryan," she said. "Maybe you're just solving the wrong picture." He twirled her smoothly, and the fabric of her gown shimmered under the chandeliers like dark water catching moonlight. When she came back into his arms, closer this time, he felt the shift. The tension was no longer just for show. The music carried them toward the heart of the ballroom, and suddenly all eyes were on them. Not the bride, not the groom, not the speeches waiting to be made. It was them. Ryan Prescott, the infamous millionaire, dancing with a woman no one could quite place, but everyone now wanted to know. Vanessa watched from her table, her jaw tight, her grip on her champagne glass white-knuckled. Savannah noticed. "She's unraveling," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the music. Ryan tilted his head. "You want her to?" "I want her to remember," Savannah said, the words sharp as glass wrapped in velvet. "Not what she did to you. What she did to me." Ryan's steps faltered slightly. "To you." Savannah drew in a breath, her hand tightening on his shoulder. "She took everything. And no one knew. Not even you." He stopped. Just for a moment. Long enough for the illusion to ripple. The music continued. "You were in this world before," he said slowly. "I was," she whispered. "Before she ruined my father. Before the papers dragged my family's name through the dirt. Before she smiled in every headline, while my mother cried herself to sleep in a hospital bed." Her voice didn't crack, but her body stilled in his arms, like a flame shrinking against a sudden gust. "Savannah Monroe?" he asked, piecing it together. She didn't answer, but the look she gave him held enough weight to fill the silence. He exhaled. "Your father was Richard Monroe. The man who built half of the skyline this city worships," she said, her voice like silk drawn over steel, "until she and her advisor dismantled his empire brick by brick." Ryan remembered. The scandal, the fall, the whispers. He had been younger then, just starting out. Monroe had been untouchable, until suddenly he wasn't. "She forged documents," Savannah continued. "She seduced board members, leaked stories to the press, and when it all burned down, she floated away from the ashes, untouched." Ryan's hands tightened slightly on her waist. "Why didn't you say anything before?" She shrugged. "You weren't the reason I came." He stared at her. "You thought this was your revenge," she said softly, a hint of bittersweet in her smile. "But you were just my ticket inside." The song ended. They stood in the center of the floor, still holding one another, as a low applause echoed around them. But neither of them smiled. The crowd clapped because they thought they'd just seen something beautiful. But beneath the surface, something was shifting, something far more dangerous than a dance. Ryan looked at her with a new weight in his gaze. "You used me." Savannah didn't flinch. "And you used me. We're even." "No," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "We're not." She began to walk away, but Ryan caught her wrist, gently, not forcefully. He turned her to face him. You could have just destroyed her with the truth. Why wait for this? Because truth without timing is useless, she replied. This is when it hurts, and when it matters. There was fire in her now. Controlled, elegant, devastating. She deserves to fall in front of the same people she lied to, Savannah added. They all do. The ones who believed her, funded her, celebrated her while my family disappeared. He stared at her, and for the first time didn't know what to say. I'm not here for pity, she said. I'm not here for a handout or some twisted rescue. Then why are you here, he asked. She stepped closer, her voice just for him. To remind them what they buried, and what refuses to stay buried. Their faces were inches apart. The space between them pulsed, not with romance, but with raw, unfiltered truth. And yet beneath it all something else stirred. Not pity, not debt. Admiration, respect. Desire laced with something far more dangerous. Understanding. Ryan let go of her wrist. So what happens now? Savannah's lips curved just slightly. Now, she said, turning back toward the crowd, we start peeling off their masks. The clink of fine glass, the low buzz of chatter, the warm hum of wealth in the air. These were sounds Savannah knew intimately. Sounds that had once been her lullaby, and then suddenly her undoing. Now they surrounded her again, but this time she wasn't the girl behind the curtain. She was the one holding it open. The post-dinner mingling took place in the solarium, where golden lamplight poured over cascading floral arrangements and rare paintings worth more than entire neighborhoods. The top investors, CEOs, political heirs, and power brokers circled like polished wolves, each drink a performance, each smile a calculated move. And then Savannah stepped in, wearing midnight silk, skin aglow under the chandeliers, eyes sharp as cut sapphire. She didn't need to announce herself. Her presence did it for her. A few men glanced, lingered. A few women whispered behind crystal flutes. She let them. Ryan stayed behind, watching from a quiet corner of the room. He didn't follow. Not yet. He needed to see what she would do with the room, and what the room would do with her. Ryan's date, someone murmured. Or his experiment. His warning shot, another replied. Savannah caught every whisper, every side glance. She wore them like perfume. As she drifted toward a cluster of financiers near the fireplace, one of them, a stout man with white temples and a Harvard tie, raised a brow. Quite the entrance. You're not exactly blending in, he said, the kind of comment meant to test. Savannah took a sip of champagne. Good. Blending in usually means you're trying not to be noticed. I prefer the opposite. The men chuckled politely, though a few eyes narrowed with amusement or suspicion. And what is it that you do, miss? She let the pause linger just long enough before offering, Savannah Monroe. That name landed like a ghost. Subtle recognition flickered across a few faces, memories of headlines, bankruptcies, betrayal, but no one said it, not yet. I suppose I used to do legacy, she continued smoothly. Now I do strategy and adaptation. One of the younger investors, intrigued, asked, strategy in what sector? Human nature, she said with a half smile. It's the most volatile market there is. The older men exchanged glances. She had their attention now, but she hadn't won them yet, and she didn't intend to. Not quickly. Savannah let the tension sit, then pivoted. But since you brought up sectors, what's your position on the crash of Flexotech? The group went quiet. One man cleared his throat. That was unfortunate. Unfortunate? Savannah said, her tone smooth. It was an ecosystem failure disguised as a liquidity issue. You all knew it. You just didn't say it out loud. Now they stared. She met their eyes without flinching. You don't have to agree. I'm just curious what kind of men double down when the map changes. One of them let out a low chuckle. You're not here for pleasantries, are you? She sipped again. Do I look like a woman who wastes time? At that, even the most skeptical among them softened. A couple of investors nodded slightly, a sign of acknowledgement, rare and quiet. Behind them, Ryan was frozen in place, watching her hold court, watching her challenge without aggression, educate without arrogance, command without asking. She was magnetic. One of the wives came up beside him, elegant, sharp. She tapped her glass against his lightly and murmured, "Careful, Ryan. That woman doesn't walk into rooms, she walks through them." He turned toward her. "And what does that mean?" The woman's smile was tight. "It means no one leaves unchanged." Meanwhile, Savannah now had an audience. The circle around her had grown. 5 men, 3 women, and a younger heir named Oliver Kingsley, whose attention seemed riveted. "I'm sorry, but I need to know," Oliver said, smiling with curiosity. "How did someone like you learn to read the market like that?" Savannah tilted her head. Trial, error, and a father who believed dinner conversations should involve equity curves and international contracts. Now the silence around her deepened, this time not from confusion, but from realization. "You're that Monroe," one of them said finally. "Richard Monroe's daughter." She nodded slowly. No performance, no defensiveness, just fact. "That's right." "God," someone muttered. "We all thought that I disappeared," she offered. "I did, for a while." "Until now?" Savannah gave a soft smile. "Until now." She didn't explain the years that followed. The loss, the hunger, the scraping through shelters, the nights spent walking so she wouldn't feel the cold. She didn't need to. Her presence now told them everything. I was built for this world and I rebuilt myself without it. Then someone made a mistake. "So, what are you now? A comeback story?" the older investor asked with an edge of condescension. Savannah didn't blink. "I'm a catalyst," she said, "and you'll realize that the moment you underestimate me." He laughed softly, unsure if he was being threatened or warned. Savannah leaned in, lowering her voice just enough. "Men like you like to think the world only collapses when you say so, but I'm the quiet kind of fire, the one you don't see until your name is already ash." The man paled slightly, then nodded once. And that was enough. The conversation turned, the air shifted. People began to treat her not as a curiosity, but as a player. Ryan approached her finally, sliding beside her with a smile that didn't quite mask his astonishment. "You terrify them," he murmured. Savannah tilted her head. "They should be terrified of someone else, but I'll let them sit with the wrong assumption a little longer." "And who should they fear?" She looked up at him, eyes burning beneath the calm. "Vanessa." He swallowed. "So this isn't over." Savannah turned toward the ballroom again, where Vanessa stood surrounded by praise and wine and smiles that didn't reach the eyes. "No," she said, "not yet." Ryan wasn't used to feeling irrelevant, not in rooms like that. Not around people who once waited for his approval before investing millions. But watching Savannah navigate the solarium, commanding the attention of billionaires and titans like she was born for it, something inside him twisted. Admiration, confusion, and something darker. He watched as Charles Everett leaned in just a little too closely. Saw how Oliver Kingsley offered to refill her drink with a boyish grin. How one of the finance moguls actually opened his notepad when Savannah suggested he rethink his portfolio structure. It was subtle, but to Ryan it felt like she was slipping out of his grasp. She wasn't his, not really. But the illusion had been sweet, and now it was unraveling. When she laughed at a remark from a French hedge fund director and lightly touched his sleeve, Ryan moved. He didn't think, he just walked. "Savannah," he said too sharply. She turned, calm as ever. "Yes?" "Can we speak?" he asked. Not a suggestion, not a request. Her brow arched, but she nodded. "Of course." She followed him to the marble corridor just outside the ballroom. The music became a muffled echo. The chatter faded behind closed glass doors. "What is this about?" she asked, arms folded. Ryan stared at her, jaw tense. "You didn't tell me who you really were." She tilted her head, unfazed. "You never asked." "That's not an answer." "No," she agreed. "It's a truth." He took a step closer. "You walked into that ballroom and made me feel like a spectator at my own plan." She exhaled slowly. "Ryan, this was never just your plan." He stared at her. "I brought you into that world. You brought me back to it," she interrupted, voice steady. "There's a difference." "And what, now you're taking it over?" Her lips parted, offended now. "Is that what you think this is? A coup I think I'm used to knowing who I'm dealing with, he said. A beat of silence stretched between them. Savannah's eyes softened, not out of pity but out of something more dangerous. Clarity. Ryan, she said gently, you want control, but I'm not here to be controlled. His fists clenched at his sides. Then why say yes to coming with me? She stepped closer. Because I needed the door open. You were the door. It hurt more than he expected. He turned away from her, pacing, trying to shake it off. And what was all that? The dance, the glances, the looks. Her voice lowered. Not everything is a strategy. Could have fooled me. She flinched just slightly. Then she whispered, I didn't come to hurt you. He stopped, looked at her. You just came to hurt her. Savannah didn't deny it. But her voice trembled now. She destroyed everything. My home, my family. My father died with the world thinking he was a fraud. Ryan's expression shifted. You said he was betrayed. But not by who? She was one of the board's silent hands, Savannah said, bitterness rising. She leaked internal files, altered contracts, and when it all burned, she walked away untouched. And you? I was 17 when it happened, she said. One moment, I had tutors and horses. The next, my mother was selling jewelry just to keep us fed. She looked up, and her voice cracked. You don't come back from that clean. Ryan took a step forward. You should have told me. And what would you have done? She asked, voice suddenly sharper. Felt sorry for me? Waved your magic wallet and fixed it all? I would have listened, he said softly. Her shoulders slumped. I didn't want you to listen. I wanted you to watch. He stared at her, breathing uneven. Then, without warning, he reached for her hand. Savannah, this doesn't have to be a war. Her lips trembled, but her walls didn't fall. It already was. I'm just the only one still standing. Silence. Then Ryan whispered, I don't know if I'm angry at you or falling for you. She blinked. Ryan, I look at you, he said, stepping closer, and I don't see a homeless woman or a lost heiress or some perfect revenge plot. I see a woman who scares the hell out of me because she makes me feel like less in the best way. Savannah's breath caught. Her fingers hovered at her lips. You think I want to control you, he continued, but I don't. I just don't want to lose whatever this is before I even understand it. For a second, her defenses faltered. You're not the only one who's scared, she said quietly. Their eyes met. Too long, too deeply. Ryan leaned in, slowly. No pressure, no assumption, and for the first time Savannah didn't step back. Their lips brushed, softly, once. Then again, with a little more certainty. It wasn't a kiss for show, it wasn't a game. It was the kind of kiss that asked more questions than it answered. When they pulled apart, she exhaled shakily. I didn't plan for that, she whispered. Good, he said, because I did. And then, just as she almost smiled, his phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Thought you'd want to see this before it hits the press. Attached, a photo of Savannah from years ago. Headline, Heiress Gone Rogue. What happened to the Monroe fortune? His heart sank. He looked at her again. At the woman who had just opened a door he hadn't even known he'd been waiting at. And he wondered, had she opened hers too, just in time for the world to shut it again? The office was quiet except for the faint hum of a server rack and the distant ticking of a wall clock. Ryan stood behind his desk, sleeves rolled to the elbow, shirt slightly wrinkled. An unusual sight for a man who always looked like he'd just stepped off a magazine cover. The photo was still open on the screen. Savannah, 18, standing beside her father at a gala, both dressed in black and silver, her hand delicately resting on his arm. Back then, her eyes still carried softness, hope. He zoomed in. The resemblance was undeniable, but what caught his attention wasn't just her. It was who stood across the room in the background. Vanessa, in a red gown, watching Richard Monroe like she already had a plan. Ryan closed the image, jaw clenched. He hadn't slept. Not really. Not since the kiss. Not since the truth started trickling out like water through a crack in the dam. He'd hired someone discreet, fast, loyal. And now the files sat in front of him, Bank transfers, memos, emails from over a decade ago. Vanessa Harrington had been working as a junior consultant for a firm contracted by Monroe Global. But she'd done more than consult. She had manipulated, falsified reports, whispered the right rumors into the right ears, pulled strings until Richard Monroe was portrayed as reckless and unstable. Then she partnered with his biggest competitor. The collapse had been no accident. Ryan let out a long, slow breath. The truth didn't just change things. It burned everything he thought he knew. Savannah hadn't just appeared from nowhere. She'd been forced into it. Later that day, Ryan found himself walking along the East River, where the sky turned silver near the horizon and boats bobbed quietly in the distance. He wasn't the kind of man who needed air, but that morning he needed distance from her, from the files, from the growing ache in his chest. But that distance didn't last long. His phone buzzed. Savannah. "We need to talk." They met at a small rooftop bar in the village, far from the social circles they usually haunted. She wore a simple navy coat and had her hair pulled back. No makeup, no armor. "I assume you've seen it," she said before he could speak. He nodded, sliding into the seat across from her. "The article, the records, all of it." She looked away. "I never meant for it to go public like that." "It hasn't yet," he said, "but it will." Her voice was steady but faint. "I was hoping to confront her on my own terms." "Why didn't you tell me?" She met his eyes. "Would you have believed me?" He hesitated. That silence was her answer. "I thought maybe," she said softly, "if I could just stand in that room again. If I could make her see me. I wouldn't need revenge. I'd just need to exist in her world again without fear." Ryan looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time saw the cost of what she carried. "Savannah, this isn't just about your past anymore. This is about what she did, and if I have proof, I can bury her." Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. "And what do I become, Ryan, if I let you fight that battle?" "You become someone who wins," he said. "You don't need to do this alone." She shook her head. "You think I'm trying to win. I'm not. I'm trying to survive it without losing myself again." He reached across the table, resting his hand over hers. "Then let me help you survive it." Her breath caught. And just for a second, the wall cracked. "I didn't come for your help," she said. "But somewhere along the way, I think I started hoping you'd offer it." There it was again. That pull, that terrifying, undeniable thing growing between them. But before either of them could speak, Ryan's phone lit up with another message. This one from his legal advisor. "Vanessa may have caught wind. She's moving assets. Fast." He showed the screen to Savannah. She leaned back. She always did run when things started to tremble. "What now?" Ryan asked. Savannah inhaled deeply. "Now we stop running." Her voice hardened. "We expose her. Not through whispers. Not behind closed doors. Publicly. Where it hurts." He nodded. "You ready for that?" She stared into the skyline. "I was born in a boardroom, Ryan. I just forgot how to speak the language. But now, I remember." Then she looked at him. "I need you beside me. Not in front. Not behind." He nodded once. "Done." But as they stood to leave, Savannah paused. "There's one more thing you don't know yet," she said. Ryan narrowed his eyes. "What is it?" She looked at him, hesitating. And in that breath of silence, something unspoken stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. "I'll tell you," she whispered, "but not here." The night air was cold, sharp against Savannah's cheeks as they reached the edge of Central Park. The city glowed behind them, skyscrapers standing tall like silent witnesses, while beneath them, secrets crawled up from the roots. They walked in silence side by side until the soft crunch of gravel gave way to stillness beneath an old iron gazebo. The wind curled between the beams, brushing Savannah's hair from her face. Ryan had said nothing since they left the rooftop bar. He didn't press, didn't demand. He waited. Because he knew whatever she was about to say, it mattered. Savannah stood still, her back to him, staring into the shadows. "My father died thinking the world hated him," she began, her voice barely audible. "Not because of a mistake he made, but because of one woman's ambition." Ryan took a slow breath. "Vanessa." She nodded. She wanted control of Harrington Monroe Holdings, so she sabotaged it from within, planted false reports, had my father's signature forged on documents that made it look like he'd moved money illegally. I saw the records, he said gently. They're clear now. But no one believed them then, Savannah whispered. No one fought for the truth. Everyone walked away. She turned to face him. My father didn't just lose his fortune. He lost his friends, his name, his health. I watched a brilliant, gentle man unravel. He died with a single question in his eyes. Why didn't someone stop her? Her voice cracked then, the first tear slipping silently down her cheek. Ryan stepped forward, wanting to hold her, but sensing she needed to finish. My mother, she never recovered. She went from galas to silence. I remember her crying over bills, apologizing for not having sugar, apologizing for my childhood being taken away. She clenched her fists. I tried to fight back. I tried to tell the board, the press, anyone, but I was too young, too unknown. They called me unstable, said I was grieving. She looked up at him now, something raw and bright burning in her gaze. So I disappeared. I let the world forget me. Ryan swallowed hard, the pain in her story sinking deep into his chest. And now? Now, she said slowly. I make them remember. There was silence. Heavy. Sacred. Then Ryan finally stepped closer, reaching for her hand. She didn't pull away this time. I want to help you, he said. But not as a savior, as someone who knows what it's like to be betrayed by the person you trusted most. Savannah stared at him, and for a moment her walls trembled. Then you should know there's something else I've never said. Ryan held her gaze steady. Say it. She hesitated, breath fogging in the cold. Vanessa didn't just destroy my family for power. She was in love with my father. Ryan blinked. What? Savannah nodded. She was younger than him, but she wanted him, wanted the company. And when he rejected her, she made sure no one else would have what she couldn't own. The air seemed to shift around them. Are you saying this was personal? Ryan asked, stunned. Savannah nodded. All of it. The sabotage, the lies. It was revenge. But she didn't just ruin him. She used you too. Same tactics. Different decade. Ryan's hands tightened. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Because I wasn't sure if you could hear it without seeing her differently. You still had pieces of her in your heart, Ryan. I don't, he said firmly. Savannah looked away. I did, he admitted after a pause. But not anymore. He gently cupped her chin, tilting her face back to his. Now I see her for what she is, and I see you for who you've become. She didn't speak. She just looked at him, open, vulnerable, real. Then she said softly, I'm not sure what I've become. He stepped even closer. Then let's find out together. They stood like that for a long moment. Two broken legacies, finding something steady in each other. But just as Ryan leaned in, his phone vibrated again. He frowned, looked down. Unknown number. If you love your reputation, Mr. Prescott, stay out of Savannah Monroe's war, or I'll bury you with her. He stared at the message. His face darkened. Savannah saw it. What is it? He showed her. She paled. She knows, Savannah whispered. She's scared. Ryan's voice dropped to a cold whisper. Then it's time to make her afraid for real. The ballroom at the Langston Club was the pinnacle of exclusivity, an invitation-only event for the city's elite, where legacy families and rising empires mingled over champagne, market forecasts, and carefully measured flattery. That night, however, the air carried a charge no one could quite name. It hummed beneath the crystal chandeliers. It rustled through sequined gowns and tailored suits like a warning. Vanessa Harrington entered in a cascade of silver silk, her diamond necklace glinting like frost at her collarbone. She smiled, offered air kisses, greeted old donors and future investors with the ease of someone who had mastered the game of perception. She didn't notice Savannah standing at the far end of the room, yet. Ryan was already there, dressed in an obsidian black tuxedo, his expression unreadable as he moved through the crowd like a current. Beside him was his legal advisor, carrying a slim black portfolio. In a room full of masks, only 3 people knew what was about to happen. Savannah didn't wear a gown that night. She wore a suit, elegant, tailored, midnight blue. It was a deliberate choice. It said, "I am not here to entertain. I am here to finish what you started." Vanessa was mid-toast when the shift began. A waiter passed through the crowd, handing out small, printed programs. On the front it said, "An open letter to the board of Monroe Global. Truth demands witnesses." Some laughed. Some rolled their eyes. Others began to read. Within minutes, the room dimmed with silence. Ryan took the stage, not as a guest, but as a storm front. "I want to thank you all for gathering tonight," he said, voice calm. "I've always believed that truth, like wine, is best served with time. And tonight, it's been aged long enough." Vanessa's smile faltered. She turned slowly, wineglass poised, trying to assess whether this was some elaborate tribute or an ambush. Spoiler, it was both. Ryan continued, "Tonight isn't about stocks. It isn't about headlines. It's about legacy, and what happens when someone poisons it for their own gain." He stepped aside. Savannah stepped up. Her heels echoed once on the polished floor, and then silence swallowed the room. "My name is Savannah Monroe," she began. "Some of you knew me when my last name opened doors. Most of you forgot me when it was dragged through courtrooms and tabloids, but I never forgot what was taken." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Savannah spoke with calm, calculated strength, not a trace of anger, only truth. She outlined the timeline, how Vanessa had begun her slow infiltration into Monroe Global under the guise of mentorship, how she manipulated internal documents, how she rerouted investment capital, how her betrayal led to her father's downfall. She didn't plead. She presented. Then Ryan's legal advisor stepped forward, clicking a remote. The screen behind them lit up with emails, real ones, dated, signed, incriminating. One of them was from Vanessa to a rival developer stating, "By the time Richard Monroe realizes it, the board will already be in my hands." The crowd murmured in disbelief. Then came audio recordings, Vanessa's voice, unmistakable, detailing how she planned to sabotage the Monroe brand and rebrand it under her control. Vanessa tried to speak. She stepped forward, one hand raised. "Fabrications," she said, voice high and cracking. "This is a setup." But then the doors opened. 2 federal officers entered the ballroom, flanked by security. The murmurs became a roar. Vanessa froze, staring in disbelief as the officers approached. "You can't be serious," she snapped. "You think I'd be that careless?" The officer raised a file. "The court disagrees, Ms. Harrington. You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, falsification of corporate records, and obstruction of justice." Gasps, phones raised, whispers turned to shouts. Vanessa's hands trembled as they cuffed her. Her heels caught on the carpet as they led her away. Her face, once always perfectly composed, now twisted into something unrecognizable. Savannah didn't move. She didn't gloat. She simply watched. As the doors closed behind the officers, someone started clapping, slowly, then louder. And within moments the room erupted into applause, not out of cruelty but catharsis, the kind that only comes when justice finally cracks the ceiling. Savannah turned away. She didn't need to see more. She walked to the balcony overlooking the Hudson, where the city lights flickered like tiny truths finally seen. Ryan followed. "You did it," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "We did." There was something tired in her eyes now, not defeated, relieved. "For so long," she whispered, "I thought revenge would feel like victory." "And?" he asked. She looked at him. "It feels like grief." He understood. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then he asked, "What now?" Savannah turned, voice low. "Now, I take my name back." But just as she said it, her phone buzzed. She glanced down. A message. Unknown number. She was never the only one. "You should have stayed forgotten, Monroe." Her blood chilled. She turned to Ryan, eyes suddenly sharp again. "This isn't over." Savannah stood at the edge of the floor-to-ceiling window, the skyline of Manhattan stretching before her like a reborn empire. Sunset poured across the buildings in gold and quiet flame, brushing light against her face, as if the city itself was bowing in acknowledgement. She had spent the last week in silence, no headlines, no interviews, no retaliation. After Vanessa's arrest, the world buzzed, But Savannah refused to speak. Not yet. Not until her voice came from a place no one could twist again. She wasn't there to feed the media's appetite for vengeance. She was there to build something that would outlive it. Ryan had offered her an executive suite at Prescott & Co. He'd even gone as far as suggesting a formal partnership. But Savannah declined. Gracefully, gratefully. "I can't grow in your shadow," she'd said. "I need to prove, to myself, that I can stand on ground I built." Instead, she chose a narrow loft in Tribeca. It wasn't grand, not yet. It smelled of fresh paint and old brick. The floors creaked in the corners and the windows were slightly scratched. But it was hers. Every floor whispered of a fresh start. She named it Monroe Strategies, not to reclaim her family's empire, but to redefine it. Her first team consisted of 4 people: a former non-profit analyst, a tech dropout with genius in his hands, a single mom who had once managed investor portfolios before life forced her into early retirement, and an intern who reminded Savannah too much of herself, young, underestimated, but burning. They worked late, ate noodles from paper cartons, built slides for clients who didn't yet believe in them. But Savannah did. That was enough. Her pitch was bold. She didn't just offer financial strategies. She offered reputation recovery, market redemption, risk reinvention. "Everyone talks about second chances," she told her clients. "I build the bridges to make them real." Ryan visited often, never intruding but always watching with something close to awe. He had never seen someone take their own wreckage and shape it into something visionary. With Savannah, there was no bitterness in her blueprint, only resilience. One night he stayed late, helping her set up a virtual conference call with her first global investor. They sat on the floor, barefoot, laptops between them, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. "You know," he said, glancing at her across the dimly lit room, "you never stop surprising me." Savannah looked up. "Is that a compliment or a warning?" He smiled. "Both." She leaned her head back against the wall, exhaling. "Sometimes I feel like I'm building something I may never live to see fully bloom." Ryan's voice softened. "That's how you know it matters." There was a pause, comfortable, deep. "I meant what I said, Ryan," she continued. "I didn't want your money. I wanted clarity." "And do you have it now?" he asked. She nodded. More than ever, she stood, brushed the dust from her trousers, and walked to the whiteboard. There in thick black marker were the words she wrote that first morning. "Build without fear, serve without apology, rise without permission." Ryan stood behind her, studying the words. Then her. "You know," he said, voice quiet, "when I first saw you, you were staring through a restaurant window, hair messy, eyes like thunder, and I thought, this woman doesn't beg, she dares." Savannah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm tired of daring. I want to live." He stepped closer, his voice a whisper near her ear. "Then live with me." She turned slowly. "You don't mean business, do you?" "No," he said. "I mean everything else." Her breath hitched. "You don't have to answer now," he added. "But you should know. I'm not just watching anymore, I'm all in." There was a knock at the door before she could respond. One of her team members peeked in, holding a tablet. "You should see this," they said. "The client in Dubai just doubled their offer. Said your pitch deck made them rethink their entire structure." Savannah blinked, then laughed, soft, startled, full of something that hadn't lived in her chest for years. Joy. She took the tablet. "Tell them we'll revise the proposal and add mentorship support for their mid-level execs." Already on it. When the door closed, she looked back at Ryan. "I'm not sure what scares me more," she whispered. "Failing, or actually winning." Ryan stepped beside her. "Then let's be scared together." She didn't say yes, but she didn't walk away. And yet, as Savannah returned to her desk that night, a manila envelope sat waiting. No name, no return address. Inside, a document, old, watermarked, a non-disclosure agreement, stamped with the logo of Harrington Monroe Holdings, dated 3 years before her father's fall, and at the bottom, in a signature she thought she'd never see again. Richard Monroe. The rooftop gala was lit like a dream. String lights glittered overhead, a jazz quartet hummed softly in the corner, and the Manhattan skyline wrapped around the guests like a silk ribbon. But for Savannah, none of it mattered. Her thoughts were still tethered to the manila envelope waiting in her office, to the signature, Richard Monroe, her father. Why had he signed that NDA? Why had he remained silent while everything around him fell? Why had he allowed Vanessa to burn everything and walk away clean? She stood near the bar, a glass of champagne in hand, untouched. She didn't hear the music, didn't notice the people watching her. She felt suspended in time until a familiar presence pressed into her awareness. Ryan. He was across the room, speaking with a pair of investors, but his eyes were fixed on her. Watching, studying. Not with suspicion this time, but concern, maybe even fear, because he knew she was slipping again into the gravity of her past. But before he could cross the room to her, another voice cut in. Savannah Monroe? The accent was French, smooth, warm, familiar. She turned slowly and found herself face to face with Julian Moreau, the investor, tall, refined, smiling with a confidence that wasn't performative. His charm didn't beg for approval, it assumed it. "I thought that was you," he said, stepping closer. "You look nothing like the girl I met at the Berlin summit 5 years ago." She blinked. "Berlin?" He smiled. "You were with your father, quiet, fierce. You corrected a German banker mid-sentence and didn't flinch when he turned red." Savannah smiled just slightly. "I remember now. You gave me a business card made of bamboo. Because I knew you'd be something rare." He leaned in. "And here you are. Again." They began to talk. Slowly at first. She remembered details. His ethical fund, his refusal to invest in oil, his belief that the future of capital was conscience. It was easy, warm. The kind of conversation she hadn't had in years, and Ryan saw every second of it. From across the room his body tensed, his hands in his pockets, his jaw rigid. He watched Savannah laugh, really laugh, for the first time since Vanessa's arrest. Watched Julian lean closer, touch her elbow gently, hand her a fresh glass when hers remained full. It was irrational, it was emotional, it was unstoppable. He crossed the room, cutting through the crowd like a rip current. "Savannah," he said too sharply. She turned. "Ryan." Julian stepped back, sensing the shift. "I should get more champagne." "No, stay," Savannah began, but Ryan cut in. "I need to speak with you, alone." Her smile dropped. "Can it wait?" "No." Julian gave her a polite nod and walked off, sensing territory he didn't belong to. Savannah turned to Ryan, eyebrows raised. "What the hell was that?" He didn't speak, not until they were on the terrace, the cold air sweeping between them. "That guy?" he said finally. "Seriously?" She crossed her arms. "What about him?" "He was flirting with you." And you were letting him?" Savannah blinked, stunned. "I was having a conversation." "Not everything is a chess move, Ryan." He paced. "You were smiling. You haven't smiled like that with me in days." She stepped back. "Is this jealousy? Are you seriously doing this now?" "I kissed you," he snapped, "and you kissed me back. That doesn't give you ownership." "I'm not asking to own you," he said, voice rising. "I'm trying to understand where I stand." She stared at him. "You stand beside me if you want to, but if you're going to question every person who speaks to me, you can stand somewhere else." Silence. Just the wind. And the thrum of pain that filled the space between them. "I'm falling for you," he said finally. It landed like a stone in her chest. His eyes burned, not with anger, but with truth. "And I don't know how to do it right. I've built empires. I've crushed competitors. But with you, I don't know how to be enough." Her lips parted, but she couldn't speak. He took a breath. "I didn't plan for this. You were supposed to be a statement, a symbol, but you're not. You're the most real thing in my life." She looked away, eyes glassy. "And I'm terrified," he added, softer now, "because every time I think you'll let me in, you shut the door again." "I don't know how to let you in," she said. "Then let me show you how." She shook her head. "Ryan, you don't understand. There are things inside me that still aren't healed, pieces that don't fit anymore." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Don't," she said. voice cracking. Don't say more, unless you're ready to see all of it. The fear, the guilt, the rage, the part of me that still wakes up expecting to lose. He stepped closer. Then let me lose with you. She stared at him. And then, finally, tears fell. He pulled her into his chest. She didn't resist. She sobbed quietly, fists pressed against his jacket, her walls crumbling in silence. He held her steady as a lighthouse in the storm, saying nothing, just breathing with her, letting her know she wasn't alone. And for the first time in years, Savannah didn't run from the breaking. She let herself fall, and in falling, something inside her started to heal. When she finally looked up, her cheeks damp, her voice was quiet. I'm sorry. He wiped her face gently. Don't be. This is what being real looks like. She nodded. I want more than just your strength, Savannah. I want your fear, your mess, your mornings, your stubbornness. You. She smiled weakly. Even the broken parts? Especially those. They didn't kiss again. Not that night. They just stood there, letting something deeper settle between them. Something that wasn't built in a moment, but in the slow undoing of armor. Back inside, the gala went on. But out there, in the cold, two people who had learned to fight for everything finally stopped fighting each other. But the quiet didn't last long. Her phone buzzed. A message. From a number she recognized but hadn't seen in years. Unknown. You think Vanessa was the last chapter, but there's one more name you forgot. Your father did what he had to protect you. Savannah went still. Ryan noticed. What is it? She didn't answer, just stared into the dark, her heart pounding like thunder. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, a silver-blue canvas beneath the morning sun. Waves crashed gently along the shore, their rhythm matching the new cadence in Savannah's chest. Calm, steady, alive. She stood barefoot on the wet sand, her hand resting on the soft curve of her stomach. The breeze lifted her white silk robe, the same one she wore that morning, the morning everything had changed. Behind her, the beach house stood like a dream made solid. Its glass walls welcomed light. Its wooden beams smelled of salt and peace. Ryan had chosen it for them. Simple, beautiful, free from the shadows of the city. They had left Manhattan a month ago, not out of fear, but to begin. It hadn't happened all at once. Healing never did. After the final message about her father's NDA, Savannah had returned to the archives of Monroe Holdings. With Ryan by her side, she uncovered the final truth. Richard had signed that document under pressure, not to protect himself, but to protect her. Vanessa had threatened to frame Savannah in the collapse. She was only 17. One whisper would have buried her in scandal. Her father chose silence over survival. And now Savannah chose to honor his name, not by chasing vengeance, but by building something lasting. She grew Monroe Strategies into something unexpected. It became a place not just for reinvention, but for restoration. She mentored founders who had failed. She supported women navigating broken partnerships. She created incubators for businesses that banks wouldn't touch, but the world desperately needed. And Ryan, he never stood in her way. He stood with her. They argued. They laughed. They got quiet when things hurt. They told the truth when it was ugly. Love didn't arrive in fireworks. It grew slowly, like roots. Invisible, then undeniable. The proposal came on a Wednesday morning. Savannah had been on a call with investors in Tokyo when Ryan interrupted her with breakfast and a ring hidden beneath a napkin. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just said, yes, with a smile that reached all the places pain had once lived. They married in secret. No media, no velvet aisle, just them, on the beach, with the wind, with silence, with truth. He read no vows. She wore no shoes, but their eyes said everything, and now this, life, unexpected, undeniable, kicking softly inside her like a second heartbeat. Ryan stepped out of the house, barefoot, coffee in hand. His tie hung loose, his sleeves rolled up. He walked to her and wrapped an arm around her waist, resting a hand on her belly. Still quiet? He asked. Savannah smiled. For now. Give them an hour. Then we'll have a gymnastics class in here." He laughed. "They take after you, restless, relentless." She turned to him. "Terrifyingly brilliant, you mean?" He kissed her forehead. "Definitely that." A soft cry echoed from inside the house. Savannah tensed. Ryan smiled. "I've got her." He disappeared inside, returning minutes later with a small bundle in his arms. Dark curls, wide, blinking eyes. The girl's name was Isla, and she wasn't theirs by blood, but by choice. Savannah had met Isla's birth mother at a shelter 2 years ago, abused, addicted, 17 and alone. She asked Savannah to raise her child when she couldn't. Now Isla was almost 2, curious, fierce. Her first word had been no. Her second was mama. Savannah took the child into her arms. Isla snuggled into her neck, and just like that, the ache faded. They weren't perfect. They were possible. Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a letter, aged, yellowed, sealed with wax. Savannah frowned. "What is that?" "Something I found in your father's files. His last letter. To you." Her hands trembled as she took it. She opened the seal slowly, reverently. "My Savannah, if you are reading this, it means the truth has survived. I hope it found you whole, or at least healing. I want you to know that silence was never weakness. It was a shield. I did not speak because I wanted you to have a future, because the world punishes loud daughters. I needed you to be free. But now, speak. Build, rise, I am with you always. Dad." Tears blurred her vision. Ryan held her tighter. Isla gripped her shoulder and whispered, "Mama." Savannah kissed her cheek. "Yes, my love. I'm here." That night, they had dinner on the sand, just the 3 of them. Later, after Isla slept, Savannah and Ryan sat under the stars. She leaned into him, her voice quiet. "I didn't think I'd get this." "What?" he asked. "A life that isn't haunted, a future that feels soft." He kissed the top of her head. "You earned it." She looked at him. "And you?" He smiled. "I just followed the smartest woman I know." They laughed, then grew quiet. The kind of quiet you only share when nothing's left to prove. Just love, just presence, just peace. She thought justice would be enough, but in the end, it was love. Unexpected, unpromised, unwavering, that saved her. Savannah didn't just rebuild her life. She rewrote the ending her enemies tried to silence. She chose motherhood, truth, and a love that never asked her to be less. And maybe that's what real redemption is. Not revenge, but finally being seen, and still being loved. If this story touched your soul, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments. From where are you listening to this story? Your support is what keeps this mission alive, one story at a time.